that. I do know about our loss prevention services that we're going to be working on and providing for you this year. And we'd like to take a few minutes this morning just to review what that looks like for you, just to remind you what your resources are here with the trust and in the loss prevention department, as well as to give you a bit of a heads up of the things that we're looking for currently as in the way of best practices. Our purpose here is to prevent loss incidents, or if they do happen, to control those loss, the impact of those loss incidents. We want to keep people from getting hurt. So we want to save pain and money, and that's the focus for the three of us here in loss prevention. And let me tell you, we're passionate about what we do. We're serious about helping you and your employees have a safer work environment and to experience fewer accidents and losses, whether we're talking about workers' compensation or general liability or auto program or what have you. So this year, the activities or the services that you can expect or that you can access through us here in the loss prevention department is best practice reviews. And I'm going to spend quite a bit of time telling you what that looks like. A lot of you have experienced one of these already in the last year. It's a little bit of adjustment to how we come out and visit and look at those factors that we have found can prevent accidents and reduce the number of claims that come in through our system. As for many years, we have the Safety Action Report, which is a risk assessment where we come out and we take a look at your facilities, your operations. We take some pictures and we give you a report with recommendations on deficiencies that we found, hazards that we found, ways that we've been able to identify where we know that you can be more compliant with safety codes, fire codes, and so forth, as well as be able to prevent accidents and losses. We also do a lot of training, just like we're doing today with the webinar. You're familiar with the monthly webinars that we do. If you're watching one of these, this is what we do on the first Monday of every month, as well as other special webinars we do throughout the year and the on-site live trainings that are available. Now, Jason just mentioned the ones we'll be doing next week for sexual harassment, discrimination prevention. And we do several of these throughout the year, mostly in November, December, and January. But you can also talk to us about making special arrangements for trainings in your area or even at your location. And so that's a resource that's available to you here at the Trust as well. We also can help provide other resources. And when we come out and do a best practice review, or when we do a risk assessment, or when we're talking about things associated with the training that we're doing, often there are resources that we have prepared that we can share with you, sample documents, procedures and policies, as well as help you find other resources that are available out there from OSHA or from Utah OSHA or from other organizations that we're familiar with around the state and country that can help you implement your safety and your risk management programs. We also spend quite a bit of time just taking your questions. You'll email us a question or you'll give us a call with a question. And that is a priority for us. If it's important enough for you to send us an email or to pick up the phone and give us a call, that's something that we want to make sure we can help you with. And so we get a wide variety of questions that come in for things that you may not be sure about. Sometimes it has to do with risk management, and sometimes it has to do with safety. Sometimes it has to do with things that we're really not very familiar with at all, but we're going to do our best to either help you find the answer or find someone who can get the answer for you. And so, if you've got a question and you're just not sure what to do, feel free to give us a call and we'll help you find, where to get those answers that you need. We also have here at the Trust something that we call a legal hotline. And the legal hotline is used for members who have a question regarding something that could potentially lead to a liability. And of course, we are not attorneys. And if we were attorneys, we couldn't actually be your attorney because of considerations where there's certain aspects of the relationship that can be considered a conflict of interest. And so often what we do, if we see that you have a question, or if you call us with a question, and we recognize this could lead to a potential liability or exposure for us, and it requires a legal opinion, we will look at that on a case-by-case basis and help you get a free consultation with a legal professional who will be working, as far as that consultation goes. That relationship is between you and that legal professional. So you have that attorney-client relationship there. And so these are all services that we provide to you to help control and prevent these loss incidents that we all don't want to have happen. There's certain factors that play a huge role in how likely we are to have a loss incident, or how well we're going to control these risks and our risk management. The very first one is your management. We would love to be everybody's risk manager, but we can't do that. There's over 550 members of the trust, and we can't spread ourselves that thin. It's very important that within your organization, you have a commitment to risk management and to safety. And how committed your management is going to be a huge factor in how successful you can be in your organization when it comes to managing risk and having a safe work environment. From that kind of automatically stems the culture. Lots of times we have organizations, and the culture that has existed within an organization becomes a very serious factor in how likely that organization is to experience losses and accidents. And sometimes it can be something that filters down from management, how committed management is to risk management. Sometimes it can be something that can be from a bad apple. Sometimes there's, one or two bad apples in your basket. Employees with bad attitudes, or who just insist on not being safe. Sometimes those cultural impacts need to be addressed on that individual level as well. So we have a responsibility as managers, and as from a management perspective, to make sure we're creating that culture of safety and a positive culture for managing risk. How important it is to the top manager is going to have a big impact on how important that risk management is on everybody in the organization. Employee engagement is key. Even if you as the executive of your organization is completely committed to safety and risk management, if your employees are not engaged, you're not going to have success in your risk management program and in your safety programs. And so engaging your or your employees in this process is really important. And there's a lot of ways you do that. When you have a performance evaluation, and you have a score that you give that employee based on their safety performance, for example. That's one way that you communicate to that employee the importance of safety to you, making that a part of how they're evaluated for their advancements and for their raises each year. And that'll make it more important to them. But there's other ways that we can engage employees, make them feel a part of the program, and that's through incentives, or what we call appreciation and recognition. We have a program here at the Trust that a lot of you are familiar with, called the TARP program, which is that appreciation and recognition program, where we can help you set up a program that will engage your employees more actively in safety in your organization. Once you have their interest and they want to have your safety program be successful, and you're committed to it, then it's pretty hard, to go the wrong direction. Supervision is also extremely important. Your frontline supervisors are the ones who have the most power and ability on a day-to-day basis to see what's going on and recognize when there's a problem and address that problem. So we also need to make sure that those supervisors are engaged and interested and motivated to be looking for and improving our risk management and our safety programs. And along with that, supervision is enforcing of standards. And this comes in this word that you've heard from us a lot over the years, which is accountability. Throughout our organization, everybody needs to know that they're accountable for following the safety rules, and they're accountable for doing their job in a safe manner and helping to control those risks that we're dealing with. If we see hazards out there in our workplace, fix them. We need to make sure that we have a process for identifying hazards and dealing with them and making sure that we remove them or control, their potential impact on us. So what we look at for 2020 in our loss prevention program, and something that is kind of new, we started doing last year in 2018 or in 2019, is what we call a best practice review. And we've set up a schedule so that we will come out over a 3-year period and do a best practice review with every single member of the trust. Some of you who represent a greater exposure, a greater risk because of your size or the scope of your operations, you may see us every year coming out to do a best practice review with you. But this is something that we will do with all members. And we sit down and we take a look at, your safety committee. How's it functioning? Are you doing incident reviews and investigations? And are you, taking advantage of the TARP program, the Team Appreciation and Recognition, to help engage your employees? Do you have a return to work policy and program? Are we doing facility inspections? Are we training? Are we looking at our fleet and vehicle risks and exposures? How about HR and management? Lots of times we have claims come in. I mean, from the general liability side, there are some significant exposures in things that are generally part of the human resource management program. And so we're going to ask a few questions, and that's going to be new for 2020. We didn't have those questions last year. And then law enforcement policy and management of that policy, as well as sewer system management. So let's talk a little bit, just a little detail of in 2020, what are we looking for in each of these categories of the best practice review? So first of all, we'll talk about the safety committee. One of the things we really like to see with your safety committee is top management participation. And that's either your chief executive or someone who is there reporting directly to your chief executive with regards to safety. We need someone involved in that committee who's a decision maker, so that as we discuss ways to prevent accidents and control our risks, if there's somebody involved who can help us know, is this something that we're able to do in our organization, to be able to make these decisions. The safety committee needs to meet frequently. So we'll ask you, how often does your safety committee meet? Is it meeting monthly or quarterly? We like to see it frequently enough that it's at least that monthly or quarterly. If your safety committee isn't meeting at least quarterly, it's probably not going to be very effective. If it's only meeting once or twice a year, that's going to be pretty hard for that committee to have much of an impact. And then we like to see that your committee has identified measurement for their success, that you have some goals, that there's activities that you're following up on and making sure that they're happening. And so we need to see that the safety committee actually is filling a purpose and that there is outcome and output coming from our safety programs, and that's being monitored by that safety committee. Another thing that we'll ask you about that goes hand in hand generally with the safety committee. Now, some of our members have a safety committee, and then they may have an incident review committee that may be separate of the safety committee. Generally, it's the same thing. That safety committee and the incident review committee is the same thing. So this would be another function of the safety committee. When we have an accident or when we have a near miss, close call, we have a process of taking a look at it, determining what happened, why it happened, what were the root causes, and what can we do different in the future to make sure that we don't have a repeat of this accident or we don't have an actual incident, of a close call. And then we identify those actions, put them into action, or we share the lessons learned throughout our organization. And a lot of you have multiple departments in your organizations, and something learned from an accident in one department or a close call in one department can be very valuable to all departments. And so we need to look at this and see, do we have a process here where we're identifying root cause, identifying how to fix the problem, how to prevent it in the future, and making sure we share what we've learned with everybody in our organization. The next best practice, we'll ask you about is the team appreciation and recognition program. The things that we look for that qualify you to participate or to receive the TAP award is that you share your safety results with your employees in a visible way on a regular basis. So every month, your employees should have some sort of feedback on how safe they have been and how safe your organization is in working towards your safety goals. This program also involves some sort of means of showing your appreciation for employees that are contributing to your safe operations, or giving recognition to your employees for their contributions to safety. And one way that we found that is very successful in helping an organization become focused on safety, and not just individuals being focused on safety, is to have this be some sort of a team-based, program. And that way, team members look to each other and hold each other accountable. Because if we're looking for the appreciation and the recognition, the incentive being something that has to be earned all or nothing by a team, then we try to encourage each other to be safe. And you can do that with multiple teams, or you can do that if you're a smaller organization. You can have just everybody be one team, but we reward ourselves, our team, based on the entire performance of the group, not just the individuals. And then management support, where we've seen this be really successful, is where we have management that gets behind this appreciation and recognition program. They come, they talk to the employees, they participate in some of the meetings, and they make sure that the employees understand how important this is to them and how much top management appreciates their efforts and can celebrate with their successes. And that makes for really successful programs where we can reduce the number of losses that happen. And just in recent years, when we've implemented these programs, we can see some fairly significant results. Now, this particular graph is one where I just selected some information from members that represent larger risks. So this would be some of our larger members. That's what the tier 1 represents. And from 2017 to 2018, we had 22 out of 52 of these larger members that implemented a program like the one I just described to you. And the rate of insurance claims on some of the lines of insurance went down as much as 40% as a group. All 22 of these groups combined, saw a significant reduction from year to year in their rate of claims. Whereas the other 30 members of this group of trust members who didn't implement such a program, they saw a similar increase in the rate. It's kind of something we see. Often we'll have one member will do a really great job and have an awesome year, and another member has a less successful year, and it offsets. And so we kind of saw that, but this was a very specific indicator here between those who were showing appreciation and recognition and incentive program for their employees versus those who did not do a team-based recognition program like we described. It works. It's very successful. We've actually seen reduction in frequency and losses for 2 years in a row now implementing these programs. And our work comp program, our work comp results for last year, for 2019 right now, are looking like one of our most successful years in our work comp program that we've had here at the Trust ever. And this is one of the major differences that we've been working on is engaging employees through these appreciation and recognition programs. Another very important program for controlling your exposure, controlling your losses, is your return to work program. And we've talked about this for years. This has always been a part of our previous TAP program, that you need to have a return to work policy. In your return to work program, you need to have a policy that states your commitment to getting employees back to work as soon as possible and accommodating those light duty restrictions. We look to see if you have a record of accommodating restrictions. So actually sit down, take a look at your loss history, and see, if those work comp claims, if you have had any, were they ones where we can see that the employee was put back to work as soon as possible if there were restrictions available from the doctor. We also will talk to you about your workers' compensation coordinator, that person in your office whose job it is to file the work comp claims and coordinate between the departments and with the insurance and everything on the workers' compensation program. This coordinator needs to be coordinating with the employee. If there's an injured employee, they need to be coordinating with the supervisors as far as, getting work, modified duty for those employees to get them back to work. This person needs to coordinate with the medical provider from the very first day that we send an employee to the doctor. There should be some way of coordinating with the doctor as far as getting those restrictions and instructions from the doctor as far as what kind of restrictions are required, or light duty accommodations can be provided for this employee. And then the work comp coordinator can also coordinate with the insurance adjusters who are also communicating with the medical providers and so forth to make sure that we manage this claim in a way that keeps the cost down as much as possible. And I know you've heard us talk about that again and again, but here's an example of the kind of impact that a return to work program can have on your organization. So these losses that I've got here on this little table, this is an actual loss history for one of our members. There's no name involved here, but this is an actual loss history. And I'm going to show you the impact of their losses on their EMOD and how return to work program, how getting that employee back to work can help you save a lot of money on your work comp premium through reduction of the EMOD. So this particular case, this is a 3-year loss history, and this is a smaller member. This isn't a really large group. And so when I talk about the dollars here, and if you're really big and your work comp premium is much larger than the numbers we're talking about here, understand you can have similar results to scale for your program as well. So there's these 4 losses that this organization had. One was just $0. We just opened the claim, nothing really came of it. And then we had one where there was some medical expense. There was $7,200 of medical expense, and that's all it was. This employee didn't miss any time off from work. That became a benefit. So that employee didn't miss more than 3 days of work. That's what we call a medical only claim. Medical only claims get reduced by 70% when they go into the EMOD calculation. So if you can have a medical only claim, if all of your claims can be medical only, it will drastically impact your EMOD. It's like cutting 70% of your losses out of the equation. And so that's a good loss to have. Well, if you're going to have one, I don't want to say there's good losses, but that's a good scenario. That's what we look for. We want to see that if there's got to be medical, we want to make sure we get this employee whole, but we want to see him working while that's happening. The next claim is one where it was a similar amount for the medical, about $8,300. But there was $159 of what we call indemnity. So, this employee probably missed a 4th day. The first 3 days aren't compensable, but the 4th day becomes compensable under your workers' comp program. And so this employee probably missed that 1 extra day, and this claim became an indemnity claim because of, 1 day that was, turned into compensation through workers' compensation. Another claim had more significant indemnity, about $1,700. This employee probably missed 2 or 3 weeks of work. They probably had surgery or something. Those are really difficult to ensure that they're going to get back to work before day 4. And we recognize that. There are certain circumstances we can't have medical onlys on everything every time. But one where it's just 1 day or 2 days or a week, there are things that we can do frequently that will allow us to move that clock up and get that employee back to work sooner, like talking to the doctor on the first day and letting him know, we want this employee back to work. It's very important for them to be back to work tomorrow, if at all possible. How can we make that happen? Let the doctor know we are serious about keeping this employee safe when they come back to work. If you tell them there's a lifting restriction, we're going to make sure they follow that lifting restriction. We don't want them getting hurt again either. And those kind of conversations, follow up, and being right, involved in that process from day one can help get that employee back to work, sooner, maybe even tomorrow. So here's the impact that we could see in this scenario. So if we just take a look at that one claim where there was that $150 of indemnity, that one day that was paid through workers' comp because they were off just a little bit longer. If we were able to take that one day out of the equation, what kind of an impact do you think that would have on the EMOD? Well, this particular organization had, at the time that we did this data set for their loss history, their EMOD was 1.44. That's not a really great EMOD. So their one is considered, expected or normal. And so if we're at 0.44, this organization is paying a 44% extra premium on their base premium because of that loss history. If we look at this particular organization and we reduce that one incident where we got them back to work one day sooner, and that second claim was also a medical only claim, their EMOD goes from 1.44 to 1.28, just over $159 of indemnity. And the EMOD calculation is designed to encourage you, to motivate employers to get their employees back to work. And you'll see this has a significant impact. If we were able to prevent no indemnity, prevent all indemnity for the claims for this particular data set that we're looking at, then this organization's EMOD would have dropped down to 1.07. And that's with all the medical being exactly the same. The only difference would have been that they weren't drawing the work comp benefit because they missed more than 3 days of work. And so that's a significant cost that, comes and it stays with you year after year, because there's 3 years of that a claim stays in your EMOD calculation. So if we take a look at this, there we go. If we take a look at this, that $159 of indemnity, well, if we just were able to get that employee back to work one day sooner, the EMOD goes from 144 to 128. That's a 16%. That's 16 percentage points that aren't being applied in that extra, premium that's being charged against the base premium. This organization had a base payroll premium of $10,000. So that 16%, when we take that out of the factor, that, reduces, all things held the same, that reduces their work comp premium by $1,600 per year. That claims in the calculation for 3 years. So what happens is a $4,800 gain by getting that, or savings by getting that employee back to work one day sooner. So $159 of indemnity in this particular case cost this organization $4,800. That's, for $4,800, you can pay to have this employee come to work and, read manuals in the break room all day. That's $159 well spent. And so, especially in these cases where we're talking about, just a few lost time days where we can maybe get rid of those, avoid those, get that employee back to work. It only saves us a few $100s, but it saves you thousands of dollars, if you can keep those claims medical only. So when we talk about best practices, that's something we really want you to understand, is that is anything you can do to keep your work comp claims medical only is going to save you a lot of money. The next best practice that we'll talk to you about is, doing your safety inspections. We should have documented inspections of all of our facilities and a lot of our equipment as well on a regular basis. So we'll ask you, are you doing documented inspections of your facilities? A lot of times we'll have people, they go out there and they're looking, and they're always looking at the condition of facilities and equipment, and then they take care of it when it's a problem. But documentation is very important because, one, it helps us establish a routine, it helps us create accountability. But also, if we have to defend ourselves in a liability case where we're going to go to court and have to prove that we take care of our facilities, that we take care of our vehicles, that they're in good condition, we need something that we can bring in and show. Here's our program of inspecting and ensuring that our facilities and equipment are in good condition. That can save us a ton of money, in some of these liability claims. So we'll ask you, are all of your facilities inspected at appropriate intervals? What does that mean? Well, some facilities, if it's a high traffic public access facility like a park, a playground, your main office, then that's something that should get inspected frequently, weekly, maybe every Friday, monthly at least, in those areas. If you have an area that has less traffic, maybe it's only a work area, only a handful of employees go to this space, then maybe that can be inspected less frequently. Maybe it's okay to do that quarterly or something like that. If you have a facility that isn't really in use and it's visited seldom, maybe we're storing some things in a building and we might go there, a few times a year to get things out of storage, that facility, maybe it's okay to inspect that facility every 6 months or once a year. So at an appropriate interval. We also want to make sure that any hazards that we see or any deficiencies that we see while we're doing this inspection are documented. Even if we can fix them while we're right there, we should still document that the hazard or the deficiency existed. Document that it was there, and then document what you did to fix it. We also need to document whether it's done right then and there or later, because it's something that requires a more work, more time and attention. We still need to make sure that those corrections, that those repairs are documented. This is our proof that we look at our facilities, that we identify problems when they exist, and then we do fix them. Because a plaintiff's attorney is going to try and prove that you don't look at your facilities and that when problems exist, you don't see them and you don't fix them. And that's going to try to establish some sort of negligence on your part. And the documentation can prove that you're not negligent, that you are being reasonable and prudent. Another best practice that's very important is your safety training. And so we will ask, have you identified safety training topics for each of your departments? And so you may look at a specific department, maybe the water department or the sewer department or the streets department. They have very specific different types of jobs that require specific safety training. And so we need to identify what are those different trainings that the different departments need. Some trainings are common to multiple departments or even all departments, but we're going to ask if you have identified your required safety training topics for each department. And there may even be within departments specific jobs that require specific training as well. Your forklift operator, for example, maybe everybody in the department isn't a forklift operator, but that forklift operator does need to get their training, at least every 3 years, for example. And there's other things, welding or, other specific jobs that not everybody does, but we need to identify whether there's safety training that needs to be provided for that. Do you have a schedule to get this training done? And is that schedule completed and documented? Make sure you keep a roster, keep a record of what topics you trained, who did the training, and maybe even just a brief outline of what the training covered, so that you can, again, prove that you provided that required training to your employees. And the most important part of any safety training program isn't the training, it's the making sure that after the training is completed, we then implement any standards that we learned as a part of that training, and that we create accountability and enforce those safety standards. Very important, especially for those frontline supervisors, to make sure that happens. Another area where we have a best practice is keeping our vehicle, fleet programs and driving safe. And obviously one of our biggest exposures, and where we see, probably about a third of all of the claims that come into the trust are for auto, incidents involving motor vehicles. So do you have a driver qualification program? We encourage you, and we ask you to have a driver qualification program that is more stringent than just having a valid driver's license. We want you to be looking for good drivers to put behind the wheel of your car, not just people who have a license. And so we also have a monthly MVR monitoring program. And most of you participate in this. If you're not, get with us and let us help you get set up so that you get a monthly report from us that gives you information on each of your drivers' motor vehicle record so that you know what kind of driver they are that you have behind the wheel. We also would like at least every 2 years see you have a defensive driver training for your employees, and maybe even more frequent for those employees who have had an accident. If someone's had an accident, they're at fault, we should require that they get some training again to make sure that they are safe drivers. We want to have documented vehicle inspections as well, just like on the facilities, making sure that those vehicles that we're operating are safe. On heavy commercial vehicles, this is required as part of the federal standards. But on all of your vehicles, passenger vehicles, pickup trucks, we should have some program for making sure that there's a documented inspection regularly on that equipment, so that we have a record that shows that we are keeping our vehicles in safe operating condition. The reason we put so much emphasis on that motor vehicle record check is because that does have a direct statistical correlation between what is on someone's driving record and how likely they are to have an accident. We've looked at studies in the past that show the more tickets that someone has on their driving record, the more likely they are to have an accident in the next 3 years. Even just having one ticket on a driving record, there's a statistical evidence that person is almost 50% more likely to be in an accident in the next 3 years than someone who doesn't have any tickets on their driving record. And of course, with our program, we recommend, that 3 is probably an area where you should probably really start taking a look at an employee's driving record. If they've got 3 citations on their record or more, or if it's a serious citation and it's recent, like for DUI or reckless driving or something like that, that should be something that you're taking into consideration and helps you determine whether this person should be authorized to operate your vehicles or not. We started doing this MVR program in 2013. And when we first started doing it, almost 20%, I think the number was actually a little higher than this, 18%. I think it was around 19% when we first started it. But about almost 20% of all the drivers that we were checking, from your drivers, as we started putting together this monitoring pool, had something on their record, either an invalid license or they had tickets or some other, thing that was a deficiency on their driving record. As we've been doing this for 6 years or so now what we call that violator rate has dropped from 18% down to just 11% of the drivers. And that's almost 15,000 drivers that we monitor every month. And 89% of them have perfectly clean driving records, as it should be. And so that's something that we can help you with, and that is a best practice that we'd like to have you doing. And with regards to human resource management, I know a lot of you, don't have the ability or don't have the luxury of being able to go out and hire just a dedicated HR manager who's has, a college degree or designations in human resource management. However, there are training programs, and there's some very important information that every person who has an HR responsibility should understand. Some real basic things. Number one is how to hire somebody, how to hire somebody without, violating their rights in any way. That's a really important thing to know. And so we'll ask about your human resource management professional, what kind of qualifications and training they have. We'll also ask, do you have documentation of disciplinary action? Very important to make sure that all disciplinary action is documented, whether it's formal or informal. Even a verbal warning should be documented somewhere, that the supervisor talked to this employee on such and such a date about their attendance, about their job performance, so that we have a record of, when those attempts at correction have been made. And if they're formally written up, obviously we need documentation of that as well. If you're thinking you need to take some sort of adverse employment action against an employee, such as a termination or a demotion where there's a cut in pay or something like that, it's really important before you take that action to make sure you consult with a legal professional, an attorney who specializes in human resource issues. And this would be maybe an example when you might call for our legal hotline assistance. If you do have an employee that you're thinking you need to terminate, but before you go down that road, you need someone to help you look at what you've done, what your documentation is, what your reasoning is, to make sure that we're not creating more troubles than we're solving when we terminate this employee. So always get legal professional consultations before you take any of these types of adverse employment action. Again, one of the big causes nationwide of human resource management related losses and claims on general liability and so forth is sexual harassment and discrimination claims. And so we recommend that you have a regular training for all of your employees to, make sure that we understand how to prevent, sexual harassment and discrimination in our workplace. At least every 2 years. If you don't do it every year, you should have a sexual harassment training. And new employees should always get a sexual harassment training. Don't wait for 2 years for that new employee to get trained. And that goes with safety trainings as well. When you get new hires, they need to get their training up front. The next area is the law enforcement policy management or policy review. We recommend that you have a professional policy program that makes sure that your law enforcement agencies have a policy and procedure manual that is current and up to date with all current legal precedents, whether that's things that are happening here in the state of Utah and rulings coming from the state Supreme Court, or whether it has to do with rulings coming out of the 10th Circuit or from the Supreme Court, as well as best practices. And there's always an evolution of what are the best practices in the industry. And so a professional policy service can help keep your policies and procedures up to date and current. If your policies and procedures, especially in law enforcement, this is a high risk, high exposure area, not just because of the safety factor, but because of the liability factor as well. And so we need to make sure we're operating from the most recent and the best type of policies. If you don't have a professional policy service, you should still make sure that your law enforcement policies and procedures are reviewed by a legal professional who specializes in law enforcement. This should be, not just any attorney, because attorneys are like doctors. They all have specialties. There's things they're good at. And the person who reviews your police department's procedures and policy manual should be someone who very specifically keeps themselves current and up to date on those issues. And we need to make sure that all the officers in every law enforcement department are also trained annually on their policies, and especially the critical policies. And so you need to identify what are those policies that have maybe changed in the last year, or the critical operation policies that we need to make sure officers are trained on every year. And a professional policy service actually can help you do that. One very common one has something that's called a daily training bulletin. That is a way that officers take 5 or 10 minutes every day, and they go through a little training online, and through the course of the year, it gets them through all the training, all the policy training they should have. And so we have good policy and procedures, and we have officers who know those policies and procedures. A breakdown in either one of those can cause, for a more severe exposure from liability, because we're not doing things the way we should be doing. And there's one other part of the law enforcement policy review. The Utah Chiefs of Police Association now offers an accreditation program. And so we do also ask you, if you have a law enforcement department, to look at the Chiefs of Police accreditation program. There are national accreditation programs that are much more expensive and costly and difficult to comply with. But the program that the Utah Chiefs of Police Association has put together is very affordable. It's much easier to comply with, and it's at least one way to make sure that we are implementing some of the most basic types of policies and procedures to make sure that we are taking advantage of the knowledge base that we have in the industry out there, so that we're doing things best as possible. The last area we ask you about, and we've been asking you about this one for many years also, is your sewer management program. Many years ago, we started recommending and requesting that you do a 100% manhole inspection every year. Now we recognize that a lot of you have different factors that affect, what is required to have a good management of your sewer systems. And so we'll look at that as being a 100% manhole inspection program or something equivalent to that. And we'll talk to you about what you're doing and what your procedures are and your policies, because often you can show us that what you're doing may not be 100% every year, but it still meets something that's equivalent for that. We also want to see that you have a good schedule for cleaning the entire system. And so we like to see something less than 2 years for cleaning your entire system. Over the years, a lot of you have really increased your cleaning frequency, and that's helped immensely. If you're not on a 2-year schedule, same thing, talk to us about what you're doing. We'll look at your loss history, and, we may agree with you that what you're doing is fine, but that's a conversation we want to have with you. Do you have a program for dealing with hot spots, those areas that repeatedly, need maintenance on them or other repairs? And do you have a fog program, a fats, oil, and grease management program, pre-treatment, for your sewer system? These are all important things that we need to be managing to keep the water flowing through our sewer systems. And are you inspecting commercial facilities and different areas in your system with regards to those fats, oils, and greases? And especially on the commercial side with restaurants and stuff, do you enforce those rules and ordinances that you may have in your communities to manage those and keep excessive fats, oils, and greases out of your sewer system? As we focused on this over years, as you can see, back in 2010, we had a much higher rate of sewer backups in our liability pool. And in 2011 and 2012, we started really asking you to look at your manhole inspection programs and increasing the frequency of your cleaning programs. And we saw an immediate result, in the drop of sewer related backups and claims. And this last year, 2019, was the best year, as far as we can see so far, is the best year that we've ever had at the trust as far as low numbers of sewer related backups and sewer related liability claims. In fact, this is about a 70% reduction in the rate of sewer backup claims, sent from compared to 10 years ago. And so these efforts, these best practices that, we will be reviewing with you and asking you to implement, really are very effective in preventing accidents, preventing liability claims, helping us to avoid having to pay out unnecessarily on some of these liability claims, and most importantly, are very effective in helping us and you keep yourself and all of your employees safe every day. Because above all, we want everybody to go home with all their parts in place and still breathing at the end of the day. That's the most important thing. So that is our 2020 loss prevention program, specifically focused on, the best practice reviews that we, will be coming around and conducting with you. If you have questions about it, obviously, submit those questions now. Well, you can also request a copy of the form ahead of time. And when we make the appointment, we will want to send out a form ahead of time so you know exactly what we're going to be talking about, and help prepare you so that we're not just dropping in on you and asking you all these things. You have no idea what we're talking about. Anyway, any questions out there, Jason?
Yeah, we do have a couple of questions, but just a reminder to you folks to type your questions into the chat box or the Q&A box so Doug can answer those now. We covered a lot of material today and some important subjects. There were a couple of questions. One was specifically on the inspection reports, if we would mind sending those out, or if we would send those out.
Yeah, and absolutely. As always, when you sign up for our webinars, we'll send you information afterwards for those of you who are signed up or attended the webinar, and we will include copies of those sample forms that we have with that email today.
Another question is regarding the MVR program. How does a member of the trust go about getting involved with the MVR program?
So there is an agreement that you need to sign just to make sure that we're covering all of our bases, for privacy reasons. understand that as government entities, we have the right to take a look at records like driving records as a part of our normal government operations. And we believe that identifying and selecting those people who will be driving our government vehicles is a part of our government function. And so we feel very confident, in our right to be able to access, and our attorneys and the state driver's license division has agreed with us because they give us access to the system. But there's still an agreement that we have you sign before we start sending you MVR reports, just to make sure that it's clear that everybody knows, why we're accessing these records and what the information should be used for. So if you would like to get going on the MVR program, just contact any one of us, Jason, Brent, or myself. You can contact us through our emails, which is our first name at utahtrust.gov. So Doug at Jason, you get it. And we will send you a copy of that agreement. Someone in your organization in authority will need to sign that agreement and send it back. And then we'll send you a form that you can populate with the driver's license numbers of your drivers, and we'll plug those into our system. And you will start getting an email once a month from us with the results of that motor vehicle records check. If you need to make changes to it, you just send us, information and let us know who to take off the list if people aren't working for you anymore. If you've hired new employees, the same thing. There's a form that you can put the necessary information into to send us so that we can add those people to your driver list.
All right, thanks, Doug. Good reminder there. Another question is there any benefit to having vehicle monitoring software installed in fleet vehicles? Telematics.
We've seen telematics, and actually there's been a lot of examples of problems that have been able to be identified through telematics. And so I believe they are valuable resources. They need to be managed properly. And you need to make sure that you're careful how you use them to make sure you're using them for the right purposes. But I think they can be very valuable risk management tools. It's not something that is on our list of 10 most important things that you have in place, but it very well, especially depending on your driving history, how many accidents you're having and why those accidents are having, it could wind up being an extremely valuable resource for you. But that would be something for you to weigh on an individual basis.
And just thinking back, we had one member who had telematics installed, and they found one of their employees driving 80 miles per hour down Main Street in the town that was a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit. And that
two members who had that same incident.
And so, there's definitely some information that can be very valuable for us. Maybe not in every circumstance, but in many, it could be a very valuable thing, in addition to these other things that we've talked about. All right, that's all the questions that I see coming up, but I'm sure that there will be more questions, particularly regarding some of that workers' compensation information that Doug gave. So please don't hesitate to contact any one of the three of us. And like Doug said, we'll be out there. We'll be setting an appointment with you to come and discuss these things. But if you want to talk about that ahead of time, please give us a heads up there or give us a call. Okay, Doug, final word?
Final word, as always, is, we care what happens in your organization, so be safe and let us help you in any way that we can. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Doug. Good job. Everybody, don't forget, we do have our regional tour next week, and I think we had some issues with our distribution. Some of our signups seem a little bit low with some that we expect to be there. So if you haven't signed up there, go to our website, utahtrust.gov, and click on training and events, and you can sign folks up. If you have a group of people that you want to send to one of these regional trainings, send that or send us a list. Just email that to us, and we can get them signed up for you if you've got a group there. Thanks so much, folks. Have a safe day.